Pronty is a Metroidvania set in a beautiful atmospheric underwater world filled with mutant fish and other memorable enemies. You play as Pronty, an adorable creature who uses his javelin partner Bront as its weapon. Your task is to defend the city of Roila against all kinds of evil forces. The city is totally in ruins, but maybe you will be able to find a way to restore it back to its old state. This underwater world is full of different environments, like peaceful waters, abandoned buildings, areas littered with oil or toxic waste, and Atlantis-like architecture, just to name a few. Every area is unique and has its own world building and hazards. There are moments when the game switches to these comic book-like cutscenes during some important events or while showing some flashbacks. These cutscenes were very impressive because of the cool transitions and sound effects. There is some voice acting here and there as well, but it can be a bit iffy sometimes. But I appreciate the effort.
Everything was all right until he forced us to enhance genetic metamorphicus.
The story has some layers for sure. There are also multiple endings, for example, but the gameplay takes the cake for me. There aren't that many Metroidvania games with an underwater setting, because the combat is hard to pull off, in my opinion. But Pronty manages to introduce you to simple but innovative fight mechanics. You can throw Bront at an enemy and click the attack button, but Pronty is always targeted by the enemies. You have the option to use auto lock-on when fighting enemies from close range, but you can also aim from a far distance, so Pronty won't be in danger. This last option is pretty difficult to pull off on a controller, because aiming with Bront and dodging and swimming at the same time is just not optimal. There were many times I needed a third hand to do this consistently, so I highly recommend you to play this game with mouse and keyboard. There is no platforming, because you don't have to jump. The level design has a very vertical base most of the time, and I feel like traversing through this is also very doable with just the buttons on your keyboard, and you will use your mouse to control Bront. The boss fights also felt a bit harder to beat because I was using a controller. I forced myself to be really close to the boss to enable this auto lock-on feature, but Pronty is not the strongest. A few hits and you will die. Luckily, you only lose a bit of progress when you die, so it's not that punishing. So in all honesty, if you decide to play Pronty with a controller, you will make it a bit harder for yourself, because using a mouse and keyboard is just more comfortable. Speaking of the boss fights, they were mainly the reason for my deaths. They all hit hard, and predicting all their moves is sometimes almost impossible. I loved their design and their flashy attack animations. Some of them were able to change the whole layout of the area, and some of them had the most ridiculous makeover by adding new attacks when they switched to a new phase. I enjoyed all of them, but this mutated shark pierced by swords called Lamina and this abomination called Decaying Majesty were my favorites for sure. Lamina has this crazy area transition, where you have to swim away from this giant spiky fin while dodging falling swords. And Decaying Majesty is just an epic fight from start to finish. Defeating these two took me the longest time. Well, except for the final boss. I'm not going to spoil this fight, but I can tell you that the final boss has different phases, and having a decent amount of stamina is really mandatory for the second phase. So keep that in mind when you have the decision between upgrading your health or stamina. There's also a lot to collect in Pronty. There are these discs that give you more backstory or info about the lore of this game. There are these memories or perks that will make you stronger and give you the possibility to have multiple builds. There are these files that function as pieces to give you more health, stamina, attack damage, or time before bronze gets overheated. Yes, that's also a feature in this game, but it barely happened to me. And there are these hidden achievements here and there that require a specific action to unlock. There are also a few hidden boss fights, and defeating one of them is needed to get a specific ending. So this game is full of exploration and hidden lore. In the beginning it's still pretty linear, but later on you get more freedom in exploring areas and beating some boss fights. There are some new abilities that keep the gameplay stay fresh for sure, but I still feel like there could have been a bit more, because there were many buttons on my controller that weren't used. Like spamming Bront was fun to do, but giving him more fight animations or more fight moves would have been really fun and memorable. I do have to mention this one feature that made the combat a bit more layered and less spammy. When you dodge through an enemy or boss, you will mark them, and when you hit them while they are marked, you will deal extra damage to them. And especially with the help of some specific perks, this feature will become very lethal and explosive. I loved this addition, and it changed up the fighting a bit, because I was taking risks to make sure I would be close enough to mark them. So in general, Pronty is a very fun underwater Metroidvania that nails a lot of things. Like swimming is easy to do, the combat is simple but effective, and the environments and boss encounters are very memorable. This game has a very charming art style and a polished presentation. I also really enjoyed the sound design and the music. The music is very atmospheric and it fitted every location. I wished the combat could have been a bit more advanced, like giving Bront more attack moves for example. But other than that, I can't really find that many flaws with this game. Exploring is very rewarding, and there is at least 10 hours of content. So I highly recommend this charming Metroidvania. There is a lot of potential for a sequel, and I honestly can't wait to experience more of Pronty and Bront and their adventures. So be ready to restore the city of Roila to its former glory and discover the many secrets of this beautiful but disturbing underwater world.